Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn, and I'm thrilled to have back with me Denise Jacobs. Denise is the author of Banish, Your Inner Critic, which we've talked about previously. And in this strange world we're living in right now, I think that's one of the pieces of advice we could all deal with right now, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I feel like, we were kind of just talking about this a little bit, that it's such a wild time now, and you keep seeing all these, I'm on, several mailing lists, and one's like, this is a great time to write your book. This is a great time to start a podcast. This is a great time to, don't let the things inside of you like waste away. And this is a perfect time, and jump on it and don't waste it, and all this stuff. And I have to say that, and even I have been like super gung ho, like put out 2 newsletters like in 2 weeks time, and was on a couple of virtual summits, and was like, and I'm exhausted, right? Already, like I was like, if I have to think about another piece of social media content to put out, if I have to think about another newsletter, like I'm going to cut somebody. And I think that there's this pressure that we're supposed to make the best of and make the most of this time. And I certainly, obviously with my background and my expertise around the inner critic, I certainly think that is, the inner critic showing up as, you should be doing more. Why aren't you doing enough? You're being lazy, all of the crazy things that are running through our heads, in addition to the, like, what is happening in the world right now.
Absolutely. I mean, if anyone's listening from the future, or even your grandparents or your grandchildren listening to this, we're currently in the middle of the coronavirus COVID-19 epidemic of now April 2020. That's the time that we're living in, just in case it wasn't clear.
Right. Global pandemic, to be very clear. Like, this is literally something that is affecting people all over the world, in every country, some countries more than others. And it's basically caused a global shutdown, for a lack of a better term, or at least a global, and the way I actually like to think about it is I like to call it a collective pause. And that is what I feel like we should be looking at it as, not as this is the time to do this amazing, big, amazing thing that you didn't have time for before, but it's like, this is the time to take a breath. This is the time to breathe. This is the time to be. Like, instead of being a human doing, which is what most of us have been doing, everybody's exhausted. Everybody's tired. Everybody is like been so busy. Everybody's been attached to their devices and cell phones, and, drinking social media like it's going out of style and stuff. And like, this is the time that we can just be like, oh, I think you can get back in touch with what's important, right? Like, you can actually, like, okay, listen, inner critic, you need to, like, just simmer down. Like, I actually need to catch up on the sleep deprivation that I've been carrying for the last 5 or 10 years, right? Like, I actually want to see my children. I actually want to talk to people and actually have, like, a meaningful conversation and a meaningful exchange and, like, a connection. I want to connect with people that I haven't had the opportunity to connect with, either because I was too busy or they were too busy, or both, right? I mean, what an awesome opportunity. Like, you pretty much know that right? Like, you can reach out to somebody and be like, what's your schedule like? Instead of them being like, oh, I'm going to be on an airplane. I'm going to be in Australia, and then I'm going to England, and then going to Berlin, and then I'm going to Cape Town. like they're like, yeah, I'm home. Well, the next 2 weeks is looks pretty good.
I mean,
right?
yeah.
So what a great opportunity. What
I
a
mean,
great
it's
opportunity.
easy to say it's a great opportunity, Denise, but people are stressed and people are anxious, and I think tomorrow we're going to hit 1 million people infected with this virus. So
Yeah.
how do we deal
Yeah.
with that?
I think first of all, the advantage of again having done so much research in the area of kind of managing anxiety, being able to manage your brain, do what your brain does. The inner critic. The inner critic is kind of a product of your brain thinking a certain way over and over and over again. And in my book, I talk about like a lot of different ways to switch your brain and shift your brain out of thinking one way and shifting it into thinking another way. Well, that is exactly what we need right now, right? We need the awareness, first of all, of what we're thinking, what's triggering the anxiety, what the thoughts are that we're repeating to ourselves that are making us anxious, and then to start to make choices about choosing other thoughts, focusing on other thoughts. So one of the things that I like to tell people and I like to talk about is that it's not about not thinking something, right? Like if I tell you don't think about otters, you're like, oh, God, dang, gun it. I'm thinking about otters because otters are adorable, right? They're super cute. Some people might think that they're freaky, but I think they're really cute. But if I say to you, look, instead of thinking about otters, think about ducks. What are you doing? You're thinking about ducks. Not that you're not trying to think about an otter, but that you've chosen something in the place of something else, right? So one of the really cool exercises that I like to share with people is to have them put their hands up in front of their face, and then so it's great to do that. So focus all your attention on one hand and imagine that hand, the palm of that hand, is holding all of these thoughts that you don't want to be thinking, right? That, you're anxious. I don't know what's happening. How's the world going to be after this? All these things that you don't have the answers to. It's not helping, right? And then you can slowly shift your focus from your first hand to your second hand, and imagine that the second hand is holding all the thoughts that you'd rather be thinking, like, this is a great time for me to get caught up on rest. I'm so glad I have an opportunity to connect with other people, whatever it is. And just put all your focus on that other hand. And once I always do that, and then I always ask people, is the first hand still there? And they're like, what? Yes, it is. And I'm like, do you care about your first hand now that you're so focused on your second hand? And they're like, no, I don't. I'm like, exactly. So I like to teach people that little trick, that little technique to help them to shift their focus from one thought to another, one set of thoughts to another, and to see actually how easy it is. It's just even from a physical standpoint. So that's one way that you can kind of trick that you can use to manage your anxiety. Another trick, and I actually don't have it with me. Yes, I actually have one. So a lot of people have squeeze balls that they've gotten. This one's a very cute pug one that you get as swag from conferences and whatnot. If you go off to professional things, you always get a squeeze ball. If you take your squeeze ball and you take it and you hold it in your non-dominant hand, I'm right-handed. You hold it in your non-dominant hand and you just start squeezing for a while. If you're having thoughts that are ruminative thoughts, so those are thoughts that cycle over and over again. Depressive rumination thoughts are thoughts about things that happened in the past. Anxious rumination thoughts are about things that are going to happen in the future. You find yourself ruminating, just like spinning round and round, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And take a squeeze ball in your non-dominant hand and just squeeze it for several minutes. And what ends up happening is the neuroscience of that is that it's a non-familiar movement because you're using your non-dominant hand, and it'll switch your brain out of focusing on the thoughts to focus on the unfamiliar movement.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting, right? So, there are tricks. There are things that we can do, and I actually really like the physical things that you can do to manage to help you shift your brain, because sometimes that's a lot more accessible than trying to, manage your thinking or to, something else. But if you're just like, if there's something that you can actually physically do, that often is a good way to kind of get you out of it.
So that's an excellent sort of tip for, I guess, dealing with anxiety. And there's obviously the fear that comes with maybe 200,000 people are going to die in the next couple of months. But now there's a lot of people sitting at home, social distancing themselves. And it's maybe not as much fear, but it's this feeling of, shall I say, guilt that there's more that you should be doing with your time. As you said, let's finally write that book. Let's finally write that podcast. And that's also giving people stress.
It's totally giving people stress. So I've read a lot of, there's some really good books on one of my, it's interesting. I actually haven't delved into his work that much, but pretty much everything that I've heard him talk about, I'm like, yes, I totally agree with everything you're saying, is Cal Newport. And Cal Newport talks, he has a book called Deep Work, and then he has another book out about managing social media and input. And one of the things that I talked about in Banish Your Inner Critic is when you find yourself getting triggered by things, especially with social media and stuff like that, to do a social media detox. And while I think at this point in time, people need social media pretty strongly. But what I am suggesting is not necessarily a social media detox where you cut it all off, but to actually practice social distancing with social media. Right? So to actually put it in place, to actually maybe to bracket time, to only, don't be checking things obsessively, but to say, okay, I'll check from this time to this time, or I'll be on from this time to this time, or I'm going to post this, or I'm going to answer responses, and that's it. I'm not going to, cycle through obsessively. I think everybody did that for the first couple of weeks. I think now everybody's starting to be burnt out. I know I am. And so to try to practice social distancing with social media, just to maintain your sanity. The other reason why that's important is because we get into a lot of comparisons with other people. Right. And so when we start to see these things like, I was just the most productive I've ever been, and you're just like, oh, why am I not productive? There's a great article. I can't remember if it was from the New York Times or what, but it was a great article, and it said, that strange feeling that you're feeling right now is grief. And what a lot of us are experiencing is kind of this grieving the world as we knew it, and grieving kind of life as we knew it, and kind of having to adjust to this now normal. And so, comparing yourself to other people who may or may not, there's a lot of remote work productivity porn going on now. Right. And so when you get caught up into that, just the same way as if you looked at all the people on Instagram who are fitness influencers, and you're just like, why don't I have a six pack? Why don't I, that's literally their jobs, that they have a six pack because it's their job to have a six pack, right? Some of these people, it's their job to make it look like their jam is productivity and remote working. So of course they're going to be putting out tons of stuff for that. But I feel like the important thing is to, and this is one of the things I talk about in the book, when you find yourself comparing yourself to other people, it's really important to be self-referential and to really pull back and to be like, what is important for me? This is your opportunity, for people who are listening and watching. It's your opportunity. This is a great time. Like I said, it's a collective pause. It's a great time to actually get in touch with what you really want to do, what's really important to you, who's really important to you. What do you need to take care of yourself? Nick, we were talking about this earlier. I read another article, might have been New York Times, not quite sure. been reading a lot of articles lately about this, but by a woman who is a professor and used to be a journalist and has done a lot of, has grown up in, is from the Middle East originally, has grown up in a lot of very stressful environments, war-stricken environments, people who were actually in the midst of fighting and conflict. And she was like, this is not the time to be trying to produce a lot. Like, you need to focus on security and safety and food and shelter. That's it. Like, you get that down and then you can focus on other things. Because frankly, if you're stressed, if you're anxious, if you're going through a lot of stuff emotionally, your brain is not have the capacity to do higher functioning. Your brain doesn't have the capacity to think lofty thoughts, to do a lot of creative problem solving and everything. You're not operating from the lobes that do that stuff. Your amygdala and your kind of lizard brain is really what's firing and really what's in charge right now. So don't try to make your brain do something that it can't do. Just give yourself permission to focus on the basic stuff. And once your brain calms down, then you'll be able to focus on the other things.
I mean, I've loved our conversation so far, but one last question I'd like to ask you is, a lot of people, this is probably the first time that they've been forced away from the office and forced to slow down. And some things that I'm seeing out there in the world is a lot of people expected that when they were they could slow down. All of a sudden they'd know, okay, now I know that I want to spend more time reading, or I know what my sort of hobbies are going to be. And they don't have that answer. And that's also giving them stress and anxiety.
Right.
How can you help people sort of who are sort of unexpectedly feeling this lack of something they were expecting to be there when they slowed down?
Kind of like existential angst.
A little bit.
More. It takes a while. So I actually am a meditator. I meditate fairly regularly, probably 3-4 times a week. And so one of the things that I, as a meditator, obviously one of my kind of go-to answers is going to be like, just sit with it. I mean, you don't I can't accentuate this enough. You don't have to do anything. Literally don't have to do anything. We don't have to be doing stuff all the time. And then I think, of what people are experiencing is that it's a habit. It's such a deeply ingrained habit to be busy, to be active, to be doing something, to be looking like you're doing something for so long that habit is what you're trying to break. Because intrinsically, all of us kind of came out of the womb knowing how to be, right? Like just being. Like that's actually our default. So if you can, every time you catch yourself, and this is actually a mindfulness exercise. Every time you catch yourself thinking, I have to be doing something, just acknowledge it and go, oh, that's a thought. Okay. And just acknowledge that you're thinking that, right? And just to oh, that's interesting that I'm having that thought. That thought is actually not necessarily true. And to just kind of constantly, until you get to the point where your brain calms down, because our brains are all firing really high right now, to just keep telling yourself, it's okay. It's okay. Or you can even say I'm safe. You literally, you have a house, you have a place to live. If this is the case, most likely if you're listening to a podcast, this is going to be the case. That's true. You have some place to live. You have enough food, right? You have loved ones. You're safe. You're okay. So it may not be the best answer, but it is an answer, right? You're safe. You're okay. It's okay for you to just be for right now.
Fantastic. Denise, wonderful, wonderful words to live by. If people want to find out more about what you've got going on and what you've got coming up, what's the best place they can go and look?
So you can go to my website, denisejacobs.com, and you can check out things there. I recommend that you actually subscribe to my newsletter, which is coming out more regularly, not every week anymore. That was just a little flash in the pan, probably every month or every 2 weeks. We'll see how it goes. denisejacobs.com/subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter, Denise Jacobs. You can follow me on Instagram, Denise Jacobs. And you can also connect with me on LinkedIn and follow me on LinkedIn. It's Denise R. Jacobs, I think, on LinkedIn. And also, by the way, if you are interested, I have 3 fantastic courses on LinkedIn Learning that I've done. One's on Banish Critic. It follows pretty closely to a lot of things in the book. Another one is called Creativity for All, and it's a lot of ways to hack the creative brain. And the last one just came out 2 days ago, and it is a creative collaboration course. So please do go and look for me on LinkedIn Learning and check out my courses there.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get all of those links down in the description below. Denise, it's been wonderful having you on, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nick.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they are backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.